My mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed up at my front door with moving boxes, demanding that my husband and I give up our $380,000 house so her 6 kids would have a place to live. They didn't knock like guests. They stood on the porch like this had already been decided. I'm 34. My husband Jacob and I are both engineers. We spent 2 years living in a cramped studio apartment, working overtime and skipping vacations to buy our first home. And because we're a childless couple, his family decided our house was expendable. You don't need 3 bedrooms, my mother-in-law said, gesturing past me like she was already rearranging the space. Sarah's kids need stability more than you need extra rooms. Sarah stood beside her with her 6 children and a stack of boxes labeled kitchen and bedroom boxes, as if we were supposed to hand over the keys and disappear. We didn't buy this house for anyone else, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. That's when my mother-in-law gave me the look she'd perfected over years, the one that said I was the gold digger who'd stolen her son and ruined the family. Family comes first, she said, and since you don't have kids, you should be willing to make sacrifices. Jacob stood just behind me, completely still. 32 years of being taught to keep the peace colliding with the reality that his family was asking us to give up our home. No discussion, no warning, just an expectation. Standing on our porch, I realized this wasn't a spontaneous demand. They'd planned this, and the moving boxes were only the beginning. Let me explain how we got to the point where my mother-in-law thought she could show up with moving boxes and redistribute our property. Sarah has been the golden child since birth. She's Jacob's younger sister, and from the beginning, the family has treated her problems like accidents instead of choices. Dropped out of high school, they got her into a GED program. Got pregnant at 19, they helped raise the baby. Got pregnant again 6 months later, they celebrated another grandchild. By 32, Sarah had 6 children with 4 different fathers, no steady employment history, and a family that responded to every crisis by lowering expectations instead of setting boundaries. Jacob was the opposite. He earned an engineering degree, built a career, and learned early that responsibility meant cleaning up after other people. In his family, responsibility wasn't something to respect, it was something to exploit. When Sarah needed rent money, Jacob was expected to help. When she got evicted, Jacob was supposed to understand. When her latest boyfriend disappeared, leaving her with 6 kids and no income, Jacob once again became the solution to a problem he didn't create. Sarah had never been told no, and that's why she believed she could have our house. 9 months earlier, Jacob and I had closed on our first home. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small yard, and a mortgage that represented every sacrifice we'd made since college. We saved $40,000 for a down payment while living in a studio apartment that barely fit our bed. We weren't wealthy, we were disciplined. Every overtime shift, every skipped night out, every postponed vacation went into building something permanent. The day we got the keys, I cried in the driveway, not because the house was perfect, but because it was ours. To me, that house meant independence. To Jacob's family, it meant wasted space. Jacob and I had chosen not to have children. It was a deliberate decision made after years of discussion, and it worked for the life we wanted to build. But to his family, being a childless couple meant we had extra rooms, extra money, and an obligation to absorb everyone else's failures. Our planning wasn't seen as responsible, it was seen as selfish. They looked at our house and didn't see a boundary. They saw an opportunity. The official demand came the following weekend, disguised as a family meeting. Jacob's mother called and invited us over for Sunday dinner. Nothing about the invitation sounded urgent or unusual. We'd been doing family dinners for years. But when we arrived, Sarah was already there with all 6 kids, and the conversation started before we'd even sat down. Sarah's situation has gotten worse, his mother said, like she was delivering a weather update. The landlord won't extend the lease. She needs to be out by Friday. Sarah stayed quiet, letting her mother speak for her. The kids filled the living room with noise and movement, the kind of chaos that makes adults stop thinking clearly. We've been talking as a family, his mother continued, and we think the best solution is for Sarah to move in with you two. Not a request, a solution. Mom, Jacob started, then stopped when she raised her hand. You have 3 bedrooms, she said. Sarah needs space for her family. It just makes sense. She spoke like the decision had already been made, like our house was a shared family asset that happened to be in our name, but ultimately belonged to whoever needed it most. The conversation dragged on for nearly an hour. Sarah's crisis, the children's needs, the family's expectations. By the end of it, one thing was clear. This wasn't about temporary help or letting Sarah crash with us for a few weeks. They weren't asking to stay. They expected us to step aside. When I finally said no, the room went silent. Jacob didn't look at me. He stared at the table, caught between 32 years of conditioning and the reality of what his family was demanding. Then Sarah spoke for the first time all evening. "I figured she'd say that," she said, looking directly at Jacob, "not me. She's never cared about this family. She just wanted your money." And just like that, my childless status stopped being a lifestyle choice and became a character flaw. That's when she called me a gold digger. Facts didn't matter anymore. Sarah needed a villain, and she'd decided it was me. After the family meeting, Sarah's desperation campaign escalated quickly. The following Monday morning, she showed up at our house with 3 of her kids in tow. I opened the door to find her already crying, her youngest clinging to her leg like a shield. "Please," she said, "just look at them. They don't understand why they can't have a stable home when there's one right here." She'd brought her children as leverage. 3 small faces turned toward me while their mother waited for guilt to do what reason wouldn't. The oldest couldn't have been more than 8, staring past me at our front door like it was salvation. "Sarah, this isn't how decisions get made," I said carefully. "Decisions?" she snapped. "You mean choosing comfort over family? Choosing empty bedrooms over children?" Our neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Chen paused her gardening, watching quietly as Sarah's voice rose and the kids shifted uncomfortably on the porch. I became painfully aware of how this must have looked from the outside, me standing firm in the doorway, her crying with children at her feet. "Think about what's best for them," she said, gesturing toward the kids again. "They need stability more than you need space." Empty bedrooms. As if our home office and guest room were wasted space waiting to be claimed. The visits didn't stop. She came every few days, always when Jacob was home, always during dinner or right after work when everyone was tired, always with tears ready and children positioned just close enough to make walking away feel cruel. Jacob hated it. I could see the internal conflict written all over his face, the reflex to protect his sister, fighting against the reality that she was manipulating him. 6 pairs of eyes followed his every move, waiting to see if he'd cave. "Maybe we should think about it," he said one night after she left, voice low, "just temporarily, until she figures something out." I turned to him. "When does temporary end?" He stared at the floor. He didn't have an answer. Decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight. Jacob had been taught his entire life that Sarah's emergencies were shared responsibilities and that setting boundaries was the same as abandonment. And Sarah knew exactly which nerve to press. By the 3rd week, the pressure spread outward. Aunts called during dinner to check in. An uncle stopped by unannounced to share his opinion on family duty. Jacob's grandmother mailed a 3-page handwritten letter filled with Bible verses about charity, loyalty, and the moral obligation to help children in need. The family group chat turned into a coordinated campaign. Articles about extended family support, photos of Sarah's kids looking tired or sad, captioned with reminders about their uncertain housing situation. Updates about job applications that never seemed to lead anywhere. Jacob's phone buzzed constantly on the counter between us. Everyone had advice about what we should do with our house. Everyone seemed to know exactly how much space we really needed. The message was unified. We were selfish for refusing. Somehow, no one ever asked why Sarah kept needing to be rescued. One night, standing in our kitchen and listening to Jacob's phone vibrate again, I realized this wasn't just pressure anymore. It was a coordinated effort to wear us down until we gave in. When emotional manipulation wasn't enough, Sarah changed tactics. She started following me. Not openly, she was careful, but I began noticing her car in places it didn't belong. Outside my office, in the grocery store parking lot, across the street from the coffee shop I visited on weekends. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. We lived in the same town. It was possible. Then, my coworker Amanda mentioned something that made my stomach drop. "There was a woman taking photos of you during lunch," she said. "You were talking to Mark, and she had her phone pointed straight at you. When I waved, she got into her car and left." Mark was my work partner. We were collaborating on engineering specs, long meetings, working lunches, normal professional interactions. But normal only matters if someone isn't actively looking for a story to weaponize. The photos multiplied. Me leaving work late, sitting at restaurants, talking to male coworkers, always taken from a distance, always without context. Sarah wasn't documenting my life. She was constructing a narrative. 2 weeks later, the photos appeared in the family group chat. Each one came with commentary about my priorities and spending habits. "Looks like someone has time for other people," she wrote under a photo of me and Mark reviewing blueprints at a client meeting. Jacob saw them. We were eating dinner when his phone lit up again, and I watched his expression change as he scrolled. "She's following you," he said quietly. "I know." "And taking pictures." "I know." The worst came when Sarah tried to convince him I was having an affair. She showed up unannounced with her phone in hand, presenting her carefully selected photos like evidence. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you," she said, "but she's not who you think she is." Jacob studied the images, then he looked at me, then back at the screen. For a brief, terrifying moment, doubt crossed his face. That was when I understood this had crossed a line. This wasn't family pressure anymore. It was harassment. And it didn't stop there. Sarah began showing up at our house without warning. Early mornings, late evenings, during dinner, after we'd gone to bed, always with an excuse, always with the kids. Sometimes she asked to use the bathroom and lingered inside, looking around. Other times she sent one of the kids to knock, forcing us to say no to a child instead of her. One night she claimed she'd lost her keys and needed to use our landline. When I offered to let her charge her phone in the car, she insisted she needed privacy. She wasn't asking for help. She was testing access. Standing in our kitchen that night, listening to her knock echo through the house again, I realized something had changed. We weren't dealing with a desperate relative anymore. We were dealing with someone who felt entitled to cross every boundary we had, and we needed protection we didn't have. The next morning, I called a security company. "I need cameras," I told the technician who came out that afternoon. "Front porch, driveway, and anything that covers people approaching the house." Jacob didn't question it. After months of unannounced visits and Sarah's escalating behavior, we both understood that documentation wasn't optional anymore. The system went live on a Tuesday. HD video with audio recording, motion-activated alerts, and cloud storage that backed up everything automatically. If Sarah was going to keep showing up uninvited, we were going to have evidence of exactly what she said and did. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday evening, Sarah arrived with two of her kids just as we were finishing dinner. She knocked hard enough that the sound echoed through the house, then started talking before we'd even opened the door. "Jacob, we need to talk. This is getting ridiculous." The cameras caught everything. Her aggressive tone, the way she positioned the kids in front of her like a shield, and the words that followed when I told her we weren't available for unexpected visits. "You can't keep hiding behind closed doors," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Those kids need a home, and you're sitting in a house that's too big for two selfish people." She was performed for an audience now, loud, dramatic, designed to make us look unreasonable to anyone within earshot. "Sarah, you need to leave," I said calmly. "You can't keep showing up here without calling first." "I shouldn't have to call to talk to my own brother," she shot back, "but I guess his wife controls who gets to speak to him now." The recording captured 23 minutes of Sarah refusing to leave our porch, making accusations about our marriage, and telling her kids that their uncle didn't want to help them find a home. The cameras caught everything they said, and that was just the beginning. A week later, I found the smoking gun I'd been unknowingly collecting for months. While backing up photos from my phone, I noticed I was still part of a family group chat I'd forgotten about, one that included Jacob's extended family, but had been quiet for weeks. Curious, I scrolled back through the message history. What I found made my blood run cold. Sarah had been coordinating the entire campaign against us. Messages dating back 3 months, detailing exactly how to pressure Jacob into giving up the house. Instructions to family members about what to say and when to call. Screenshots of real estate listings showing what our house was worth and how much Sarah could sell it for. "He feels guilty when the kids cry," one message read. "Make sure they see how upset the children are." Another, "His wife is the problem. If we can prove she's selfish or unfaithful, he'll choose family." There were photos I'd never seen. Pictures of our house taken from different angles, like someone was documenting the property. Screenshots of our social media posts with commentary about our privileged lifestyle. Even discussion about which family members were most likely to influence Jacob's decision. They'd been planning this for months, not just asking for help, but strategically manipulating him into giving up our home. The group chat was a complete blueprint of their manipulation campaign. But the message that made me screenshot everything and forward it to my personal email was from Sarah's latest post. If they don't agree by next week, we're moving to phase 2. I didn't want to know what phase 2 was. That night, I sat Jacob down in our living room with my laptop, the security footage from Sarah's latest visit, and the complete message history from the family group chat. You need to see this, I said. I played the recording first. Sarah's voice calling us selfish, threatening to make our lives difficult, telling her kids their uncle didn't care about them. Then I opened the group chat and let him read through months of coordinated manipulation. I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. His sister hadn't been desperately seeking help. She'd been running a calculated campaign to steal our house. They planned all of this, he said quietly, scrolling through message after message of strategic manipulation. Every conversation, every guilt trip, every time they brought up the kids. He looked up at me and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Clarity. They never intended to ask, they intended to take. He finally heard what his family really thought, and he was done protecting them from the consequences. The next morning, Jacob made the decision I'd been hoping for but hadn't dared to expect. We're cutting them off, he said over coffee, his voice steady in a way it hadn't been for months. All of them. Sarah, my mother, anyone who was part of this. I looked at him carefully. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I'm sure. He pulled up the group chat messages on his phone again, scrolling through months of coordinated manipulation. They weren't asking for help. They were plotting to steal our house. That's not family, that's fraud. The evidence had changed everything for him. Seeing the calculated nature of their campaign, reading their discussions about manipulating him through guilt and children's tears, understanding that every emotional conversation had been scripted, it shattered whatever loyalty he'd been clinging to. Sarah's been planning this since we bought the house, he continued. Look at the dates on these messages. She started organizing the pressure campaign before she even got her eviction notice. The timeline was damning. Sarah had been working on taking our house for longer than she'd been facing any actual crisis. He said we were cutting them off completely. And I believed him. But cutting off his entire family wasn't going to be simple or painless. Jacob had grown up in a tight-knit extended family where everyone knew everyone's business, attended the same church, and gathered for every holiday and birthday. Walking away meant losing more than just his immediate family. It meant missing weddings, graduations, and family traditions he'd been part of his entire life. It meant explaining to mutual friends why he was no longer speaking to his sister or mother. It meant accepting that some relationships couldn't survive the truth. What about Christmas? I asked. Your grandmother's birthday, the family reunion next summer? Then we'll start our own traditions, he said, with people who respect our boundaries. I could see the sadness in his eyes even as he spoke. This wasn't what he wanted, it was what had become necessary. The family he'd grown up believing in had revealed itself to be something else entirely. We spent the evening preparing for the confrontation we knew was coming. Sarah wouldn't accept being cut off quietly, and his mother would mobilize every relative available to pressure us into backing down. We reviewed the security footage one more time, 23 minutes of Sarah harassing us on our own property, making threats, and refusing to leave when asked. We organized the group chat screenshots chronologically, creating a clear timeline of their conspiracy. Most importantly, we discussed what Jacob would say when they showed up, because they would show up. No explanations, I said, no justifications, no discussion about why we're making this choice. Just boundaries, he agreed. We knew they'd try everything. Guilt about the children, accusations about my influence, promises that things would be different if we just gave them one more chance. But we also knew we were done negotiating with people who viewed our home as their backup plan. We were ready for their final attempt, and we weren't going to make it easy. They came on a Saturday morning, exactly as we'd predicted. Sarah arrived first, but this time she wasn't alone. Jacob's mother was with her, along with 2 of his aunts and all 6 kids. They stood on our front porch like an intervention committee, clearly expecting their numbers to intimidate us into compliance. I watched them through the window for a moment before opening the door. The security cameras were rolling, capturing everything in high definition with crystal clear audio. Jacob needs to come out here, his mother announced without any greeting. We're settling this today. There's nothing to settle, I said calmly. We've made our decision about our house. Your decision? Sarah stepped forward, her voice already rising. Your decision to let children become homeless while you hoard space you don't need. The neighbors were definitely watching now. Mrs. Chen had come out to check her mailbox and was lingering nearby. The family across the street had paused their yard work to listen. Sarah was performing again, making sure her accusations carried far enough for witnesses. "Those kids need stability," she continued, gesturing toward her children who looked confused and uncomfortable with the adults shouting around them. "And you're choosing selfishness over family." Everything was being recorded this time, and that made all the difference. Jacob appeared beside me in the doorway, and I felt him straighten as he faced his family. Months of conditioning and guilt were fighting against the clarity he'd gained from seeing their manipulation documented in black and white. "You need to leave," he said quietly. His mother looked shocked. "Jacob, don't let her control what you—" "I'm not being controlled," he interrupted, his voice growing stronger. "I've seen the group chat. I know this was planned." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face went pale, and I watched his mother's expression shift from surprise to fear as she realized what he meant. "You've been coordinating this for months," Jacob continued. "The emotional manipulation, the surprise visits, the pressure campaign through the family, all of it." Sarah tried to recover first. "We were trying to help." "You were trying to steal our house," Jacob said flatly. "I read your messages about selling it, about manipulating me through guilt, about proving my wife was unfaithful, so I'd choose family over marriage." His aunts looked genuinely confused, clearly not aware of the full scope of Sarah's scheme, but his mother's face told a different story. She knew exactly what he was talking about. "You documented our conversations," Jacob continued, "planned your arguments, strategized about which family members to send and when. This wasn't desperation, it was a calculated plan to steal our home." The kids were crying now, upset by the tension and raised voices they couldn't understand. That's when I stepped forward with my phone, ready to play the recording from Sarah's last visit. "We have security cameras," I said simply. "Everything you've said and done here has been recorded, including the 23 minutes last week when you refused to leave our property and made threats about making our lives difficult." I hit play, and Sarah's voice echoed across the porch and into the street. "You can't keep hiding behind closed doors. Those kids need a home, and you're sitting in a house that's too big for two selfish people." The recording continued with her refusing to leave, making accusations, and telling her children their uncle didn't want to help them. His aunts looked horrified. The neighbors had stopped pretending not to listen. "We also have the family group chat," I added, pulling up the screenshots on my phone. 3 months of messages planning this manipulation campaign, including discussions about what our house is worth and how Sarah could sell it. Sarah lunged for my phone, but Jacob stepped between us. "It's over," he said, looking directly at his mother. "You are no longer welcome on our property, any of you." "Jacob, you can't," his mother started. "This is our house," he said firmly. "Our property, our decision, and our answer is no." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. "Our house, our rules, our decision." And just like that, the golden child lost her protection. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Within hours of the front porch confrontation, Jacob's extended family had heard about the security footage and group chat evidence. The aunts who'd witnessed Sarah's scheme firsthand were horrified. Word spread quickly through the family network about the months-long manipulation campaign and the documented harassment. Sarah found herself suddenly isolated. Family members who had supported her housing crisis were backing away from someone who'd been caught planning fraud. The same relatives who'd pressured us to help were now questioning everything they'd been told about the situation. Jacob's mother tried damage control, calling family members to explain that we'd taken things out of context, but it's hard to explain away planning messages and recorded threats when people have heard them directly. The family group chat that had been so active with pressure campaigns went silent. 3 weeks later, we received a formal letter from a lawyer representing Sarah, threatening legal action for defamation and invasion of privacy regarding the security footage. Jacob forwarded it to our attorney, who responded that recording people on your own property was completely legal and that the footage showed Sarah harassing us, not the other way around. The legal threats stopped after that. More importantly, so did the visits, calls, and manipulation attempts. Our phones stopped buzzing with guilt trips from relatives. Our doorbell stopped ringing with unannounced family emergencies. Our house became quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. Jacob struggled with the loss at first. 32 years of family connection doesn't disappear without grief, even when it was toxic. But as weeks turned into months, I watched him relax in ways I hadn't seen since we'd bought the house. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to manage their expectations, he told me one evening as we sat in our living room, our 3-bedroom living room that belonged to us and no one else. We installed better security, changed our locks, and blocked the family members who'd participated in the pressure campaign from our social media and phones. Our house became what it was always supposed to be, a sanctuary. 6 months later, we hosted our first Thanksgiving as a family of 2. No guilt about missing family obligations, no stress about managing other people's emotions. No unexpected guests demanding our attention or our property. Just quiet gratitude for the space we'd protected. Our house became our sanctuary again. And we learned that sometimes the best way to protect your family is to choose who gets to be in it.